All right, class. So let's finally get to beginner animals. Before we actually get to the animals, I do want to go over a couple of things that you need to look out for while you're actually taking care of the animals. So we are going to start with all of our heating elements. What kind of heating elements do we have? How do we control them? All of that fun stuff. So we have these things called herpstats. They're basically specialized thermostats for heating items we use in the reptile or animal keeping world. So this top picture right here, we have quite a few of these on campus. It's called a herpstat. It's the company that makes them. There's a few different types. They're not all actually from herpstat. So we will go over a couple different types in the labs once we're actually in person. So what these do is they have temperature probes that go into the enclosures. You set them to a specific temperature that you want for the daytime. They can do a nighttime drop. So you have to kind of use them, get used to them, play with them a little bit to get to know how to actually utilize them properly. And then always whenever you go into into the labs and you know there's enclosures that have these, double check your temperatures. The things below, so we obviously have different types of thermometers, hygrometers, that kind of thing. So when in doubt, look in the enclosure, see if we have any of them, look at where they're reading. Some of them double for temperature and humidity. And then we have this thing called a temperature gun. So we have a bunch of these. We should have some in every single lab, but what they're used for, it's basically like a thermometer, but you can travel around with it. You point and click, and wherever the little red dot hits, it's going to tell you what the temperature is. So we can literally check the hot end, the cool end, the basking spot, the animal. We can check all of those temperatures with this one tool. So they're kind of fantastic. They're important to use. I have them at home. I have them at work. So very good tool. Get used to using them. I want to see people using these. So we actually know what temperatures and things our animals are being kept at. All right, so different ways to heat. So in order to understand who's going to have a herpstat, what kind of heat they're going to have, where do you need to check for the hot side, cool side, you need to understand the heating elements that we have in the enclosures. So the left side are called heat panels. These are specialized plastic panels that are supposed to hang from the top of an enclosure. They're designed specifically to radiate heat downward. And then they are not supposed to get hot on the top. So the back side of these things are heat protected. So they're supposed to have a heat shield on them to help protect the enclosure or the ceiling of whatever they are attached to. So you shouldn't have a fire hazard. They aren't supposed to get hot enough to burn your animal on the surface that is inside of the enclosure. So that's a plus. When in doubt, always worry about it. So make sure that you observe your animals, make sure they're not actually getting burnt from them, but they shouldn't be able to. And these always, both of these items on here actually, should always be attached to a thermostat. That way we can't overheat and accidentally damage or kill our animals. All right, heat mats are the thing on the right. So these are flimsy, they're much thinner. These are made to go in between enclosures on the back side or underneath of glass tanks, that kind of thing. We have these in Gecko Lab right now in between our enclosures. They're getting ready to move, but different enclosures have these. These have definite, unique, and good purposes, but when in doubt, if you can do a heat panel, I prefer the heat panels. Again, always on a thermostat. But what I truly prefer as far as our heat goes is a more natural lighting option. So if you can give them heat source with light, it's much more natural for them than just heat magically coming out of nowhere where there's no light. Outside in the wild, they get their heat from the sun. The light comes from the sun. So if you can, we want to try to give them a more naturalistic way of seeing, basking, all of that fun stuff. So light bulbs, very large variety of light bulbs out there in the world for animals, not just reptiles alone, but it's important that you understand what types of light bulbs we have. So when we're in the lab, again, I'm going to show you hands-on what all different types that we do have. There's a couple new things out there that I don't even have images of up here. So we have your standard heat bulbs, which look like regular light bulbs. There's red ones, blue ones, purple ones, clear ones. There's a bunch out there for the record. The blue and purple ones, we just steer clear of. People think the animals can't see them at night, but reptiles definitely can. So when in doubt, don't spend the extra money on those ones. Just look for a deep heat projector, or maybe these type C, or not type C, the ceramic heat emitters, which is this thing right here. So those just put out heat, so you can leave those on at night, and you're not going to have light keeping your lizard thinking that there is light in the sky, right? The bulbs that are cone shaped, these are specifically shaped to direct your light. So these are more like your basking lights, right? These ones just provide natural light, maybe a little bit of heat. These are going to create a hot spot with direct light. Your bigger bulbs, especially labeled bulbs, are going to be something like a mercury vapor light bulb. These produce a lot of heat. These also shell out something called UVB. It's very, very important in the reptile world. Birds, mammals also need it. Reptile world is just blowing up a lot more because facts are coming out that reptiles actually do need this stuff. So UVB lights can come in these mercury vapor bulbs, these little spiral fluorescent bulbs, or these fluorescent tube lights as well. So we technically have all three on campus. We use them in different types of enclosure settings. So they all have a good time and place. There's not just one proper end all, the perfect light. So it really just depends on what your setup looks like. So we will go over that more in class. I'll show you guys things firsthand. All right, so a little more about UVA, UVB, and all of that. So there is lectures upon lectures upon lectures about UVA, UVB, this full light spectrum, but we are not going to go into that full thing here. When you take herpetology, you will get a very, very large deep dive into this for a good portion of the semester. So long story short, animals that we house in our care naturally came from the wild. The wild uses the sun. So natural daylight has this UVB, UVA radiation, and it's where they get their vitamin D, and that allows them to do other natural processes in their body. So we have to mimic this in human care, or else they're lacking this essential vitamin that they need to synthesize calcium, amongst all kinds of other different things. All right, so just so you guys can see a spectrograph here, right? We go all the way from X-rays down to our standard visible light. So we have UVA, it's part of that full spectrum lighting, but UVB here is where you're going to get things like your vitamin D. So that's what's important, that not all light bulbs put out. All right, so UVB, why is UVB important? All right, so UVB, ultraviolet B, it's going to be that thing that we get vitamin D from the sun, right? So these light bulbs are able to put this out there. It allows the reptiles to absorb vitamin D, synthesize calcium. Calcium creates strong shells, strong bones. Both of these are essential to other bodily functions. Immune system, you know, keeping away illnesses, all of that fun stuff. This is very important for all of that. All right, a couple examples of if you don't have this and you try to maintain an animal like a turtle or a lizard. So you can see in the pictures, you can have misformed shells, very soft shells, something called metabolic bone disease, which is what this bearded dragon has. It's very unhealthy, very uncomfortable. A lot of the times the animals end up needing to be euthanized because there's just too much damage. Their bones are very brittle, easily broken. You get kinked backs like this guy has, or misshapen jaws, that kind of thing. So having these lights also, the proper spectrum, is going to help with circadian rhythm, make sure breeding cycles, and even in some cases, like different colorations of your animal. There's been some studies out there that in Brettles pythons, I've seen, I think at least one with ball pythons, where they started using UVB light and you noticed a color change in your animal where their colors were a little bit more bright and vibrant. So it's naturally done outside. We should provide it in human care for them. All right, moving onward from light and heat, a couple other items. So we're going to start working with some of our snakes. So I want to make sure you guys understand what equipment is in the lab. So we will also stare at this stuff in the lab once we're there. So we have snakes, snake hooks, field hooks, and there's another thing on the next slide called snake tongs. So we're going to go over these now. All right, so a field hook has 90-degree angle. So these top two, 90-degree angle. All right, these are reinforced handles and sturdy metal tips. These you go out into the field to flip logs, rocks, that kind of thing. It extends your arms so that you're not putting your hand in harm's way where maybe you're out looking for, say, rattlesnakes, which are venomous. It keeps your hand out from under the unknown side of that log, allows you to safely flip it. So these are sturdy. They're made for the brute force needed in field work. They're not necessarily designed to help handle and hold a snake comfortably. So the snake hooks, that's where those come into play. So don't try to use a snake hook out with field work and flipping really heavy things because they aren't normally reinforced. They tend to be a hollow handle so that it's lightweight because you have the weight of your snake. You don't want a heavy tool in order to help handle them. So the snake hooks, as you can see, are J-shaped more or less. So they are U-shape, I guess. Our snakes are round, right? So we need a proper shape to hold those bellies. All right, so a snake hook is made for handling comfortably. All right, so if you have a snake who is a little more defensive, that kind of thing, or if you're working with venomous species, you might be using snake hooks to move them from point A to point B safely so that you don't get bit. All right. Snake tongs. These are interesting little things. So think of them like the wonderful little toys, little T-Rex heads. When you pull the trigger, the T-Rex jaw moves. Same principle here. All these are is you have this levered arm. All right, when you pull the trigger, it's going to come down as fast or slow as you pull the trigger. And what it's going to do is it allows you to scoop the snake's body into this bottom platform. And then this arm's going to come down and grip it. So normally we don't use these for just your standard handling. The main reason why I would see anybody using these is if we are maybe out in the field and looking for venomous snakes. It gives you a sturdier hold on the animal. If you're in animals in human care, same idea. You're normally only going to see these used on hot animals, so venomous animals. Also can be used as feeding tongs very easily. So maybe say we have a pair down in Norbert's enclosure, we could very easily use these as feeding tongs too. So not normally going to see these in use in our labs. Maybe out in the field. All right, onward to the fun parts. So this is just a list of the common name of the animals that we're going to go over. You also are in charge of knowing the Latin, the scientific names. I do not have it on the slide here, but they are with the rest of the actual slides. So please know for your quizzes, you've got to know those Latin names. All right, starting to break them down. So snakes. Eastern corn snake, so Pantherophis guttatus. These guys are native here. Fantastic little animals. I think, trying to think if I've actually seen one out in the wild. I don't know if I have. But they are native. You're going to find these more readily down south in southern West Virginia than you will up here. But they're definitely native to our area. You can see definitely further south. So yeah, native here. All right, so for each animal, you're going to have temperatures, humidity, basking spots, that kind of thing when that information is available for them. And we'll go over diets and everything. So however you want to organize that in your notes, just kind of try to keep it simple because quiz questions will be on this type of stuff. So ambient temperature for these guys, 75 to 85. So if you're using those temperature guns, you should be able to do cool side, warm side. All right, basking spot, upwards into the 90s, makes them happy. So 95 is a good basking temperature for them. All right, humidity, think of our area here. It can totally go lower or higher than these numbers, but a good relative humidity range is 40 to 50%. Right, and another thing just to say for any snake species that we have, you are always going to want to provide a humid hide for them that's going to be higher than the normal relative humidity. It's good for shedding and that kind of thing. So just know that that is there. All right, always going to try to provide a humid hide. Diets. So any snake that we have, this is kind of in general. All right, we're going to have rodents, chicks, quail, a lot of different things. Some of our snakes will eat fish. So the corn snakes basically on mice. Some of our larger ones might be able to eat some smaller rats. Every once in a while, we might mix it up and throw in a chick or a quail. So always check the feeding board. All right, corn snakes can be housed together. So if we do have any housed together, make sure we don't feed them together because they will fight over food, so to speak. So we always remove one, feed one in a tub. You can feed the other in the enclosure, but don't ever feed them together. It can cause some problems. All right, so facts about the species. Just some fun facts, nothing too crazy. So these guys, most people utilize these as a starter snake, a starter colubrid. They're normally very friendly. They're not overly aggressive or defensive for the most part. Every once in a while, you have a little wild card. They come in a variety of morphs, which is what the picture is showing you. So we have normal colorations. This one here is going to be an okatee. You have clementine, caramels. There's thousands of morphs for these guys. So a lot of different color variety. All right, so they got their name, the corn snake, not just because they were often sometimes found in cornfields, but the checkered belly that they have looks like maize. So it's kind of where they got their name from. All right, we have absolutely bred these guys on campus for a couple years now. So we have a few different generations, and we do plan to breed them more this year. So you will absolutely be able to see some eggs being laid and babies hatching, hopefully this year, as long as our snakes take. So exciting. All right, next snake. It's the black rat snake, also a native species to our area. We've actually found these guys. We've had to go remove them from some dorm spaces because the juveniles always find their way in somehow. So definitely native right here in our backyards. The name is Pantherophis allegheniensis. So these are wonderful snakes. We have 2 on campus. All right, so 70 to 85 ambient, basking of about 95 again, and similar relative humidity, 40 to 60% though. All right, so as you look through the PowerPoint here, pay attention to the colorations and the pictures that I gave you. These guys can have a little bit of a variation in their color pattern. So when they're juveniles, they'll look like this. And then as they grow larger, they start to lose that pattern. They get really dark. Some of them almost go jet black. Others, like the big guy in my office, Houdini, he actually maintained a lot of his pattern, which is kind of abnormal. So these guys will average 4 to 6 feet. Some can get relatively large. They can get upwards to 8 feet on a rare occasion. All right, so definitely considered largest snakes in West Virginia. And then these guys, because of that little saddle pattern that they have on them, especially with these juveniles, and then as they're kind of in their quote unquote teen years before they lose a lot of that pattern and go really dark, people mistake these all the time for copperheads, and then they will kill them because they are dangerous copperheads. So try to make sure if anybody's like looking at a snake saying it's copperhead, you might be able to save an eastern rat snake if you know how to identify it properly. All right. The next snake for beginners, the ball python, is known as Python regis, is their Latin name. These guys are native to Central and West Africa. They live in the semi-arid grasslands, forests, agricultural areas, so they're kind of okay being in disturbed areas. They can kind of deal with it. So central area of Africa there. All right. Ambient temperatures going to be in 70 to 90. Their basking temperatures can go into the low 100s. And their relative humidity is a pretty decent range. So look at that, 45 to 75%. All right, so there is a lot of misinformation about ball pythons out there. There's a lot of people out there that have kept them one way, and as research moves forward, we have to keep updating what we find out, right? So these guys actually are semi-arboreal. A lot of people think that they're going to be more fossorial, they're going to stay in the ground, they only live in termite mounds, so they think living in a rack system is like the perfect way to keep these guys. And that's not actually really the case with these guys. So a lot of times you're going to find them in the wild, up in trees, low brush areas. You might find them on the ground. You might find them in a termite mound. So they're going to actually use a lot of different variety of habitat. They're also crepuscular. You might find them out in the day. You might find them out at night. You might find them out just in that dusk. They're most commonly going to be out in that dusk to dawn space, which is why we're going to label them as crepuscular. All right, so these guys can live a pretty decent amount of time. These guys have been known to live 50 years or so. It's a good while. Colubrids, some have gotten up there. I think the oldest colubrid on the books might have been up in the 40s. We have one that's definitely reaching upper 20s on campus right now. All right, with pythons. Pythons tend to be overfed. Ball pythons naturally in the wild will eat around 10 times a year. So that's less than once a month. Got to think about what prey size they might take down. But in human care, they tend to be overfed. People think everything needs to eat about every 2 weeks or every week. That can lead to a fat snake, especially in the python world. So pay attention to the food board. We might have somebody fast or skip a week. That way we continue to keep their body in a more lean, healthy manner instead of adding extra fat, which will stress them out. All right, turtles and tortoises. I think I got 3 species for you guys in this group. Stigmacheles pardalis. So leopard tortoise, this is Dilbert. He's the one in the back of the classroom in 301. So these guys are native to Africa as well. Dry savannas of Eastern and South Africa. So that is actually a picture of our Dilbert. All right, so ambient temperature 90 or 75 to 90 degrees, basking of at least a 100. So they need it warm. Relative humidity 40 to 60%. We definitely need to keep a humid hide for him that's in the 70% area. It's very important for them to have proper humidity when they need it so that they don't get pyramiding of their shell. All right, turtles and tortoises 100% of the time are going to need full spectrum UVA, UVB light. They need that UVB. They got that big shell on them, need a lot of calcium synthesis going on. So they have to have UVB light. If you don't, they can get soft shells, misformed, misshapen shells, brittle bones, all that stuff. All right, diet for these guys. These guys are strictly herbivores. All right, some tortoises out there are going to be omnivores and they'll eat bugs and stuff. These guys do not. These guys are strictly herbivores. So vegetables, which will be like leafy greens, different squash, sweet potato, a lot of different greens and vegetables. Some fruits. Fruits are going to be very rare in these guys' diet. Anything that's over sweet for most tortoises can mess up their gut. We don't want that to happen. It can cause death, actually, if we do that. So fruit's going to be there every once in a blue moon. All right, a complete diet is going to be something like a pellet diet. So dog food technically counts as a complete diet. So what we use is a company called Missouri. They have specialized formulas for all the different animals that we house. So we have a specific tortoise diet for the leopard tortoise and a different diet for the other types that we have. Right, so he gets a lower protein complete diet. And then we also provide different hays, different grasses. Sometimes we grow live grass for him to eat. So if you ever see that in his window, please water it. And then we also love to give him succulents. He absolutely loves cactus pads. So we do have some of them growing down in the greenhouse right now. All right, facts for these guys. They lack that knuckle shield that most tortoises have. So this little V shape looks like it's cut out. There's normally in most species a scoot right here that's going to kind of block that head. So what this does, it actually allows them to lift their head up high enough so that they can actually go and swim and keep their heads afloat. So it's pretty rare for a tortoise. They're one of the very few that can actually comfortably swim. They're not the most graceful things. All right, second largest tortoise in Africa. The sulcata or the spurred is the largest. And these guys can store water. A lot of turtles do this. They will store water in a bursa sac in their back end. So when you pick up a tortoise, a lot of times you might go, oh, he peed on me. It's actually this bursa sac where they can hold liquid. All right. Our next tortoise is the red-footed tortoise. We have two of these guys on campus. We have two brothers. We have Oni and Sherman. Right, Chelonoidus carbonaris. All right, Latin's not my strong suit some days. All right, so these guys are a South American species, so we're jumping continents here. Dry and wet forested areas, grasslands, savannas, so they have a pretty decent range. As you can see, they cover a lot of that map in South America. Low end of Central America there. So this is one of our guys on campus. All right, ambient 75 to 80, and then basking, they do like it pretty warm. So we want a basking spot of 100. Definitely need the full spectrum. And these guys need pretty high humidity. So whenever you go in to take care of these guys, if we have dry substrate, we definitely need to take the hose and mist it down, mix up that substrate, make sure their humid side of their hides is wet underneath of there. That way they can go hide and be in a place with an elevated humidity. But we have issues keeping humidity for these guys. They definitely like it humid. All right, diet. These are one of the omnivorous species. So these guys are actually pretty special. So they will absolutely eat greens and vegetables, plenty of them, but they specialize on fruit. So red-footed and yellow-footed tortoises specialize on fruit. So where other species, if they ate this much fruit, would cause unbalanced digestive issues, these guys, they need the fruit. They specialize on it. They can have plenty of fruit. They'll eat mango, apple, just about anything. So plenty of fruit for these guys. And then also always want to offer hay, grasses, and then definitely offer the protein with insects and that kind of thing. They tend to like roaches and superworms more than crickets. At least our two do. And then we also do a complete diet as well. We have a pelleted diet for these guys. All right. Also, just a side note, I tell you the types of foods. If I'm going to ask a question on the quiz, I'm going to ask, are they carnivorous, omnivorous, insectivorous, that kind of thing. Just so you know. All right. Species facts, male. The males can be vocal. I've absolutely heard our two boys. So depending on the season and how temperatures are, these two might kind of get kicked into a breeding season, and they'll absolutely be vocal while they're trying to climb out of their enclosures. So they kind of get this switch turned on and they want to go try to find a female. And so you'll definitely hear throaty, croaky noises. They kind of sound like chickens almost. And these guys need shape once they're adults. They don't have this really rounded shape. They actually have an hourglass shape if you look at them from the top down, from a bird's eye view. And then ideally, these guys are not supposed to be overly territorial, but of course our two brothers are, or else they would be housed in one giant enclosure, but they tend to like to spar, and it's a pain. So if we ever have them out, we can't have them in close quarters, or else they will definitely start trying to bite each other. So you have been warned. All right, Eastern box turtle, Terrapene carolina. So these guys are native right here in the United States. They are here in our backyards. I have seen them at the park down the street from me. We've seen them on campus. So we got these guys due to a fellow at Jesuit University. He had this collection on their campus of people who brought him box turtles that they thought were lost. They were on the roads, that kind of thing. They aren't supposed to be in human care. They're wild. So we have them because we didn't want them to get euthanized due to people's lack of proper animal care out in the wild there. So when in doubt, if they're on the side of the road, leave them there, help them cross the road in the direction they were facing, and then leave them there so we don't have to add more turtles to our collection. All right. So Again, our area 70s to 80s is your ambient, basking of 90, humidity 60 to 80%. These guys you tend to find them around places where there's water sources, so creeks, ponds and stuff. They are not aquatic turtles by any means, but they do like living closer to wetter areas. So humidity is a little bit higher for them. And then of course they need that full spectrum lighting, UVA, UVB. Diet. These guys are fun with their diet. So opportunistic omnivores. So these guys are going to eat a little bit of everything, right? Insects, carrion. So if you don't know what carrion is, so if they come across something that's recently dead, they will absolutely take advantage of that. Grasses, clovers, hays, fresh greens, fruits and vegetables. It's pretty much all on the table for these guys. So pictured here, we have somebody going after a strawberry, someone's eating a worm, and the picture on the left there is one eating a snake. Now, ours, so we have a colony of both boys and girls. They're split into two different enclosures, but our colony was absolutely observed apparently at Jesuit University, cornering and hunting down a garter snake. So they ate a garter snake. So they're kind of like little velociraptors with shells. It's very interesting. All right, these guys are listed on IUCN as vulnerable. And then they also have something called a hinged shell. We have another turtle species on campus that has this as well. So what that means is they're able to actually move part of their shell, and it's part of the protection that they have. So they can literally lock themselves inside of that shell. With that hinge, you have to watch where you place your fingers if you go to pick them up, because they will accidentally pinch you. You can get your finger stuck in their shell. So be wary of where you place your fingers when you pick them up, because if you scare them, you might actually get pinched. All right, sexing these guys, just to make sure if you ever get anybody out to weigh them and can't remember who you pulled out of which one, you can look at eye color. It's not fail safe. All right, most of your females have more brown. Some of ours are completely brown. Males normally have bright red, bright orange. So their males are much more colorful normally. All right, males and females. Males are going to have a concave, so they're going to have a dent in their belly. That's for mating purposes. They have to be able to make it over that female shell, so they have a dent in their belly. And then we also have a difference in our tail lengths. So females have a nice little short tail. Males have to hold their hemipenes and stuff down there, so they have to have a bigger tail in order to hold the mating equipment down there. So they have longer, larger tails. Okay. Right, on to lizards. Bearded dragons, so Pogona viticeps. These guys are fun. We have the central bearded dragon. There are other species out there, but we have the central. They're more common in the pet trade. Right, native to Australia, central brushlands, deserts areas for these guys. For the record, it's not all barren desert. There is the brushland. There's forested-ish areas with these guys. All right. So basking, they like it nice and hot. So at least 110 for basking. Ambient is 75 to 90. So low end, that cool end, hot end. All right, humidity. Don't need crazy humidity temperature or humidity ranges for them. So 35 to 50%. When they're shedding, we might bump it up a little bit to help them. All right, lizards. Lizards 100% are going to need UVA, UVB light. These guys are very prone to get metabolic bone disease without this. It's very common for people thinking these are great starter lizards. They're super easy. They don't need anything special. That is incorrect. You have to have the special lighting. Have to. All right. Definitely omnivorous. These guys are insectivores that supplement with vegetable material. So they're omnivorous, they're primarily insectivores, and then a lot of them tend to overly love their vegetables. So you can't just feed vegetables, you definitely have to have the insects in there as well. If you overfeed and just feed greens, it can cause some kidney problems. If you overfeed and only feed insects, it can also cause some other health problems. So good balance of both is healthiest. So omnivorous. All right. These guys, a lot of different lizard species have what's called a femoral pore. You can help sex lizards this way. Females, if they do have them, tend to have much smaller ones. Males are going to have much larger femoral pores. All right, so a lot of people recognize these guys from movies like Holes. They are not venomous. All right, these guys are not going to be deadly by any means. Most of the time, these guys are not even defensive. These are some of the most friendly lizards on the planet. I have come across one very, very angry bearded dragon because it was very mistreated, and it took me about 2 weeks at the pet store to get him to calm down and like people again. So these guys are wonderfully easily handleable. You just got to know how to work with them. All right, another cool trait with these guys, they can change their coloration a little bit. Nothing quite like a chameleon, but it's mainly on their beard. So that beard, they can puff up, they can turn it jet black, it can turn a lighter brown. So depending on their mood, if they catch sight of another male, they might turn jet black, or if they get scared, they'll turn that beard different colors, puff it out, bob their head with it. So different reasons for it. Okay, we have two different types of blue-tongued skinks. If you ever see anything labeled BTS, that's blue-tongued skink. All right, we have a northern and we also have an Indonesian. So just so you can see them side by side and kind of see the differences, northerns are going to have less dark coloration on their bottom half compared to the Indonesian. Indonesians are going to have a lot darker, more of that black coloration. Right, their patterns are obviously a little bit different too. Right, so Indonesian and northern. So the northerns are native to Australia. So there's a few different species, but we are talking about the northerns. All right, semi-desert, grassland, scrubland type areas. They like hiding in different burrows. Right, and the Indonesian, much to its name, is going to be from Indonesia. All right, again, arid grasslands, woodlands, again, like hiding in burrows. All right, temperatures for these guys. Fairly similar, a little bit different between the two. So basking temps, ambient temps, going to be the same for both. All right, 100 to 105 basking, they like it decently warm. Ambient temp, 70 to 95. Humidity is where it gets a little bit different. So the northern, the guys from Australia, 40 to 60% humidity, and your Indonesians like a little bit higher humidity. So we're going to keep our Indonesian Maryland a little bit more on the humid side. So it's important you pay attention to who is who. All right, lighting, again, definitely need the full spec. These guys have fluorescent tubes in their enclosures. These guys are absolutely omnivorous. They will eat whole prey items. Every once in a while, we'll give them things like mice or chicks. Definitely a bunch of different insects, as well as their plenty, plate full of vegetables, fruits, complete diets, that kind of thing. So they tend not to be overly picky. They'll eat just about anything. All right, species facts. Northerns are readily bred in human care versus our Indonesians, which are not. So Indonesians, if you find one at a reptile show and a pet store, chances are there might be there's definitely going to be exceptions to the rules, but chances are if you find an Indonesian blue-tongued skink, it's going to be an import from the wild. So you want to kind of make sure you pay attention to that. They can come in with all kinds of parasites, they can come in with mites, they can come in with all kinds of different conditions. Right? So they're ovoviparous, which means that they actually have live offspring. So they develop fully on the inside and then they basically hatch out and give live birth. It's odd because I literally just saw one of these videos pop up on Facebook today. So it's pretty cool. They give birth to a fully functional miniature version of themselves. So they literally eat their own placenta and walk off. Pretty cool. And yes, absolutely, they do have blue tongues. They're not poisonous, not venomous, anything like that. They're just for a defense. So if they get scared, they open that mouth up, pop out that bright blue flashy tongue, and it's supposed to kind of try to help ward off any predators from trying to come after them. The other thing with these guys is they have a pretty decent bite. So these little fat backs of their heads, it's a bunch of jaw muscle. So ours tend not to be very bitey, but every once in a while you can scare them or something. So just be warned, they do have a pretty decent bite force. All right, the leopard gecko. Everybody loves the leopard geckos. They're pretty common. We have one. He was a donation to us. Somebody did not want them anymore. So these guys are native to highlands of Asia, throughout Afghanistan, parts of northern India. So they have a pretty different range from most of the animals in our collection. Dry and semi-desert areas. Some of those areas actually have more foliage than people think. Right, and these guys are characteristic from most other gecko species. They can actually blink their eyes, and they have that nice puffy, really soft tail. All right, so 75 to 90 in their daytime. And then they drop in the evenings. We want to have him sitting at 70 to 80 in the evenings. So you notice they don't really have a basking spot. So we do provide light. If he does want to come out and bask, he absolutely can. But these guys are crepuscular to nocturnal. So he's normally not ever going to be out in the daytime unless we're actually feeding him. And they practice what's called cryptic basking. So cryptic. So what they'll do is they'll be in their burrow, and at those dusk to dawn periods of time, they might stick out part of their tail or part of their leg, just a part of their body. And that's where they're going to get some of that UVB light. So there's a lot of stuff out there on the internet that says these guys don't need any UVB. They're going to live perfectly long, healthy lives without it. But we provide ours with UVB. It's getting more and more prominent out there that most of these guys end up actually using UVB light. They get that vitamin D and everything from the sun. Even if it's just the little bit of time that they do it, it can make a difference in them. So off my soapbox, provide things UVB. All right, humidity 30 to 40%. Don't need anything too high. We will provide a humid hide when they go to shed. You want to bump up that humidity. All right, insectivorous. These guys are primarily insect eaters. When in doubt, if some small mammal comes across their way that they can eat, they will absolutely try. So every once in a while, we can treat them with like a pinky or something like that, but that's not going to be the norm. They tend to be really high in fat, and that leads to an unhealthy gecko. So crickets, dubia, mealworms, waxworms, that kind of stuff, and he loves them. These guys are actually really fun to feed. Link will, our guy's name is Link. He will wiggle his tail kind of like a cat pouncing. So they're very cat-like little geckos. They're kind of fun. All right, so geckos in general. Fun fact, when they shed, it's really hard to tell when they actually go through a full shed if they don't go milky colored, because they eat their shed. So they normally don't leave any trace behind. It doesn't allow other animals to know that they were around there with skin left behind, and it also kind of helps replenish what they lost in making their new skin with all that growth. So this particular genus, Iblepharus, these guys have movable eyelids. So all of the other geckos that we have cannot blink. They have fixed eyelids. They have a specialized scale over their eye. These guys actually have movable eyelids and can blink. So that's abnormal for a lot of geckos. Right, and these guys are better at climbing than people give them credit for. They are not the most graceful, but ours can absolutely climb his little rock wall that's in there. So they have toenails. They do not have the ability to adhere to surfaces like a lot of geckos do. So if you're holding him, don't expect him to just actually hold on. You need to hold on to him a little bit to make sure he doesn't fall. But they can climb better than most people think they can. All right. Getting close to the end, guys. Celestis warini. So this is a very unique species. Not a lot of people have these guys. So the giant Hispaniolan or giant Haitian galley wasp. So they look very blue-tongued skink-esque. Right, these guys native to the island of Hispaniola, Dominican Republic, and Haiti. and they live strictly in forested areas. You will not find these guys outside of forested areas. All right, so 75 to 85 temperature, basking of 90. Right, and they do like high humidity, 60 to 80% humidity for these guys. These guys are very carnivorous. We do a lot of insect feeding. Every once in a while, we might throw in some small vertebrates. So obviously not overly large. They're very sleek and slender lizards. All right, pretty fossorial, right? They love hiding in places. You have to have hiding places for them. If all they have is like a water dish and like a half log that you can see through, you're probably going to have a stressed out galley wasp. So hiding places are a must. You got to have a lot of foliage in there for them. They feel most comfortable when they can either A, be completely out of view, or B, think that they're completely hidden, hiding amongst like the leaf litter and that kind of thing. So their average size is about 12 inches in length. And these are one of the few animals that we have on campus that's listed as vulnerable. So a side note with this picture, you notice I have photo arc with Joel Sartori. So this gentleman has been to campus to photograph some of our animals. If you guys wander into a bookstore, or if you don't have the book yourself, wander into a bookstore and take a peek at it. But he is doing Project Photo Arc to try and photograph all of the animals on the planet before they disappear, and is definitely specializing with those who are listed to, you know, give them some light. So we've actually had him take pictures of some of our snakes, definitely a bunch of crayfish, because most people don't have the crayfish. So he may come back up to campus, so you might get the opportunity to actually meet somebody who works for National Geographic. Pretty cool. All right, guys, this is the last animal. All right, the African bullfrog. So Pixiphalus adipersus. So also known as the pixie frog. African bullfrog or pixie frog is the most common names used for these guys. Another South African species. And these guys get big. So we will look at Kirby this week. Our guy's name is Kirby. I actually think our guy is a gal. I'm not actually sexed Kirby. Females get bigger, but they are one of the largest toads. So I don't offer basking spots for these guys. The amphibians, you tend to not necessarily do basking spots, but you do want to have a proper temperature gradient for them. So he does have a heat mat. All right, 75 to 82. So warm side, cool side, you want to let him choose. And then the humidity, African bullfrogs can actually have a relatively low humidity. So we let him oscillate. Sometimes we let him go lower humidity. Other times we let them have higher, but we definitely let them have the choice of one side being wetter than the other. All right, diet, definitely carnivorous, should mostly feed on insects. Every once in a while, you can supplement with things like mice and small birds, but again, overly fatty and not great. You can end up with a very, very obese frog very, very fast. And just to note, there's a fact on the next slide. So if you look at this guy's mouth, you have all these smooth edges and then you have these projections right here. So they actually have tooth-like projections for catching prey. That's not normal with frogs. So it's pretty unique with these guys. So be warned, we've never had a bite by ours yet, so I'd like to keep it that way. But if you do accidentally get bit by these guys, it can actually be kind of painful because they have these tooth-like projections. All right, so I have this link. I'm going to put the link up on Sakai for you guys to watch, because if I play it, YouTube will block me because David Attenborough is narrating this clip. So watch this clip. It's pretty cool. Males are the ones that watch over the tadpoles after they hatch. So this guy here in the video is going to notice that the tadpole pool is actually starting to dry out. So he needs to make sure they make it to water. So dad watches over all of these babies and makes a pathway for them to get from the tiny, small drying up pool into the larger body of water so that his babies make it. So pretty cool. So dads are in charge of taking care of 3,000 to 4,000 babies, however many the female lays. And these guys are pretty cool. So water can be scarce. So their rainy season is going to hit and it can dry up pretty fast. So these guys hatch within 2 days and become tadpoles. No, okay. I'm not going to let it play. All right, guys, so that is it. We are going to be hands-on in class. So I will get this posted ASAP, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.